Hi there, Steph here. In today's video, I want to talk about how my view of my own gender has changed over the course of my transition, because it's changed quite a bit. I remember when I first kind of came out to myself, and I was in therapy, and I had just made my first, real good trans friend. And I remember having conversations with my friend and with my therapist about how, I felt very FTM, female to male, with a heavy emphasis on the male. And I also sort of carried myself in this way that was really emphasizing my own masculinity. And I really needed to do that, especially, considering the family I came from and the ways that masculinity had been modeled to me growing up. When I realized my transness, I felt like the only way that anyone was ever going to really take me seriously as a man was to really emphasize that part. And so even though I never wore super feminine clothing in the first place, I tried to even further masculinize my wardrobe. I tried to even further sort of bring and highlight those traits out in myself when I was going about in the world. And part of that was about really trying to quote unquote pass in the world, even before hormones, but especially when I first started hormones. And now I've really grown so much more comfortable in my own skin. And as my body has sort of more matched, that sort of masculine one that I've always really felt like I identified with, my actual vision of my gender shifted. And I remember very, very, very early on in my transition, I'm sure I made a video about it at some point, but I remember this day when I was 2 weeks on T, and I got on the train, and I'm sitting on the train, and a woman came on the train, and I saw her butt rub on the pole of the train, and I got so turned on in that moment, and it was really surprising. I heard my brain voice say a different thing than it had ever said before, and that was really shocking. But what it kind of enlightened in me was this really clearer image of how my sexuality is actually fluid. And I had the same exact kind of relationship to my gender, where after transitioning, I actually became much more attuned to how I feel my gender shifts day to day, week to week. And for me, I describe myself as gender fluid because I've been able to notice that shift, and it doesn't make me any less masculine when I feel that way. But now I feel a lot more comfortable being myself and being willing to embrace other feminine characteristics. There was a video I made on here talking about how I didn't want to lose certain feminine characteristics in my personality because they felt really important to me. Things like being very nurturing and being soft, I wanted to keep those characteristics, and I have. But I think that identifying those characteristics as innately feminine or masculine was part of a problem that now I don't quite do. So I think that my journey with gender has been really interesting, and I also just don't so much identify with the concept of being a man anymore. And I do want to be seen masculinely when I leave the house. When I go and interact with society, yes, I want you to call me he, but what I found was that I actually really, really prefer being called the they when I'm around other queer and trans people. And a big part of that is that when I go into society, with straight people, cis people, I want them to see my masculinity. I want them to acknowledge it, and I want them to sort of see that side of me when I'm interacting in the world. But when I'm with my queer and trans friends, I want them to see the more nuanced version of my gender, the one that is fluid, the one that shifts, the one that actually de-identifies me with transness. It's more about like you see me, not necessarily you see a particular gender. That's not at all to say that I think that like transness is something that I don't want to identify with, but it's more on a deeper spiritual level of there's no sort of catch-all phrase that is going to define me as a human being. Like really it's just me as a whole, me as like a soul or whatever, me as like this inner self that has experienced so many different things. And how can one gender marker or one piece of gendered language actually describe that when you're referring to someone? I don't think it can. At least in my case, it can't for me. So, yeah. Anyway, hope that was interesting, and yeah, I'd be super curious to hear about how you are relating to your gender. And I also know plenty of other trans people who do identify as like man or woman, and that is really, really important to them because of the journeys they've taken and how it sits with them personally. And that is like totally, totally cool and super valid. Everyone's different, I suppose, aren't we? But yeah, I hope you have a wonderful day, and I'll see you next time. Bye.